What happens to the soul that chooses to sever its own thread, not from a desire for oblivion, but because the weight of living becomes an unbearable gravity? Ancient wisdom, from the dialogues of the Bhagavad Gita to the trance readings of Edgar Cayce, suggests this is not an end, but the activation of a profound cosmic law, a law of cause and effect so precise it governs the very fabric of consciousness. The body falls silent, but the soul does not vanish. It is still there, caught in the immediate echo of its final choice. It hears the sounds of grief, it sees the ripples of the pain it sought to escape, but it can no longer interact. It has become a ghost to its own reality. This is not a story about divine punishment or hellfire. This is an investigation into the physics of the soul, an exploration of the evidence that suggests our universe is governed by a perfect, impersonal system of karmic law. A system where the final act of a desperate consciousness does not escape its logic. It triggers its most intimate and revealing mechanism. To investigate these laws, we must turn to our primary witnesses, not mystics in the conventional sense, but meticulous cartographers of the unseen. Our first witness is Edgar Cayce, a simple man from Kentucky who, in a self-induced trance, could access what appeared to be a universal database of knowledge. For over 40 years, he gave thousands of medically accurate health readings for people he never met. But beyond that, his readings painted one of the most detailed maps of the soul's journey in modern history. Cayce wasn't a preacher. He was a phenomenon, a man who, while unconscious, spoke with the precision of a scholar about the karmic forces that shape our existence. Our second and third witnesses are not individuals, but pillars of Eastern philosophy. The Bhagavad Gita, an ancient dialogue, is not a scripture of faith, but a direct philosophical instruction on the nature of reality. It presents the soul, the Atman, not as a belief, but as an indestructible reality, and karma not as fate, but as the spiritual equivalent of Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. This law was most profoundly articulated by the philosopher Adi Shankara. He was not a storyteller, he was a logician of the highest order. Shankara's Advaita Vedanta is a rigorous philosophical system that maps the journey of the individual soul as it moves through the grand illusion, or Maya, lifetime after lifetime, driven by the engine of its own actions until it rediscovers its true identity as Brahman, the ultimate reality. These are not three separate sources. They are three independent expeditions arriving at the same staggering conclusion: the universe is not random. It is a perfectly balanced system of learning, and the soul is its primary student. What makes Cayce's testimony so compelling was his own internal conflict. He was a devout Christian who, in his waking life, struggled deeply with the information his sleeping mind produced. The concepts of reincarnation and karma were alien to his own faith, yet the readings insisted on their reality with unwavering consistency. This was not a man building a new religion. This was a man reporting, almost against his will, on the mechanics of a universe far grander and more complex than he had ever imagined. The meticulous documentation of his work, preserved in the Association for Research and Enlightenment, forms a verifiable archive, a dataset of the soul's journey. The Bhagavad Gita's authority comes from its context. It is not a peaceful sermon delivered in a temple. It is a crisis intervention on a battlefield. It is Arjuna, the great warrior, paralyzed by the existential horror of his duty. And the response from Krishna, the voice of the cosmos, is not to offer simple comfort, but to recalibrate his entire understanding of reality. The Gita's central argument is that the soul is the only thing that is real and cannot be harmed. This is not presented as a hopeful belief, but as the fundamental law of existence, the axiom upon which all ethical and spiritual physics is built. And if the Gita is the axiom, Adi Shankara is its greatest mathematician. He did not simply accept these ideas, he built an unshakable logical fortress around them. Through rigorous debate and philosophical proofs, he demonstrated that the separation we feel between ourselves and others, between our soul and the universe, is the core illusion, the Maya. His philosophy suggests that the afterlife isn't a place we go to, but a progressive awakening from this illusion of separation. It is a journey back to the profound mathematical certainty of unity. So what is the immediate consequence of this cosmic law? Our sources describe it not as a place, but as a state of consciousness, a self-created quarantine. Imagine a sound suddenly cut off, but its echo is trapped in a sealed room, bouncing off the walls endlessly. This is the state of the soul. It has attempted to silence its pain, but has instead locked itself in a chamber with its echo. Edgar Cayce called it a grey mist, a world built from the very things the soul tried to escape, the unexpressed feelings, the unspoken words, the unresolved pains. Each resentment becomes a heavy stone in this space, each fear a cold wind. The Bhagavad Gita provides the fundamental principle for this. Krishna explains that the soul, the Atman, is unborn and eternal. It cannot be destroyed. Therefore, the act of self-termination is a logical impossibility. You cannot destroy what is indestructible. You can only violently sever its connection to a temporary vehicle. The result is not oblivion, but a state of profound energetic dissonance. The soul is still bound by the very attachments it sought to flee. Adi Shankara would describe this state as the peak of Maya's power. The soul, believing itself to be a separate, suffering entity, acts on that belief in the most extreme way possible. The universe, in its perfect karmic logic, responds by giving the soul exactly what it created, a reality of absolute, self-imposed isolation. It is here that the first judgment occurs. But it is not a judgment from God. It is the soul being forced to witness the unwavering truth of the law it has enacted. It sees the chain of consequences it unleashed, the pain it did not end, but merely passed on to others, amplified. This is not a punishment. It is the universe holding up a perfect mirror. It is not a prison. It is a classroom. And the first lesson is about to begin. To understand this state, we must look to the Vedantic concept of the subtle body, the Sukshma Sharira. This is the energetic blueprint of the soul that carries our consciousness, mind and karmic imprints, the samskaras, from one life to the next. When the physical body is discarded prematurely, the subtle body, still heavy with the unresolved trauma and attachments of that life, cannot ascend. It is trapped by its own spiritual density. This is the true nature of Cayce's grey mist. It is not an external environment. It is the soul's internal chaos projected outward as a holographic reality. The world literally becomes a mirror of its own mind. The fear of loneliness manifests as an endless silent expanse. The guilt becomes an uncrossable wall. The soul is not in a prison. The soul is the prison. This is the ultimate expression of Shankara's Maya. The illusion of separation has become so powerful that it has created a universe composed of nothing but that separation. And the mirror of karma is not a passive screen. The soul does not simply watch the grief of those left behind. The law is more intimate, more profound. The soul is made to feel it. It experiences the shock in a mother's heart, the wave of despair in a friend's mind, not as an observer, but as a direct sensation. The very pain it sought to extinguish is now the only thing it can feel, reflected back from every life it touched. This is the law of spiritual physics in its purest form. The universe does not pass judgment, it presents data. It forces the consciousness to experience the true energetic equation of its final action. It is a diagnostic process, showing the soul the wound it has created not just in the world, but within the unified fabric of consciousness itself. If this metaphysical model is accurate, then its implications are staggering. It reframes our entire understanding of pain, purpose, and reality itself. The first implication is that there is no escape, not in the punitive sense, but in the mathematical sense. Consciousness cannot be deleted. Every action, every thought, every choice remains a part of our energetic signature. This single idea dismantles the very foundation of despair. It suggests that the belief in oblivion is the greatest illusion of all, a miscalculation of the fundamental nature of being. The second implication is that pain is not a cosmic error. It is a feedback mechanism. The journey of the soul in this self-created reality is not a punishment for leaving, but a direct consequence of the unresolved attachments and traumas it carried. This transforms our perspective on suffering right here, right now. The struggles we face are not random cruelties. They are, as the Gita teaches, opportunities to resolve the karmic knots that bind us. To heal them in this life is to lighten the load for the journey to come. This leads to the third, most profound implication. We are not victims of the universe. We are co-creators of our own reality, both here and hereafter. As Adi Shankara argued, the world we perceive is a projection of our own mind. The grey mist of the soul is the ultimate, undeniable proof of this principle. The soul is forced to confront the fact that its inner state creates its outer world. What does this mean for the person watching this video right now? It means that the inner work of self-understanding, of forgiveness, of resolving one's own darkness is not a psychological exercise. It is the most practical and urgent work we can do. It is, in a very real sense, the act of building our future, moment by moment. If the soul is the architect of its own prison, then it must also hold the key to its own liberation. But where is that key found? This understanding that our inner state dictates our reality is the hidden engine behind the world's great spiritual traditions. It explains why practices that seem extreme to the modern mind, such as asceticism, were developed with such rigor. The intense disciplines of Buddhist monks, the fasting and solitude of Christian mystics in the desert, the yogic practices of Brahmanical sages, these are not acts of self-punishment. They are acts of spiritual physics. They are a form of high-intensity training for the will. These traditions understood that the attachments, cravings, and aversions of the mind are not mere personality quirks. They are the very chains that bind the soul. They are the raw materials from which a potential grey mist could be built. The ascetic, therefore, is not running away from the world. He is running towards the core mechanism of reality. He is deliberately starving his attachments, confronting his inner darkness, and purifying his subtle body while he still has the anchor of a physical form. This is the development of true spiritual strength. By mastering the inner world through disciplined practice, the ascetic forges a will that is not easily swayed by the winds of fear or despair. They are consciously cultivating the inner treasures, clarity, compassion, and equanimity, that become the soul's only true currency in the realms beyond. It is a profound preventative medicine for the soul. This reveals a deeper truth. The journey of purification that the lost soul is forced into after death is the very same journey the spiritual practitioner chooses to undertake in life. One does it by choice, the other by consequence. Both are governed by the same immutable law. We must sooner or later confront the universe we have built inside ourselves. The soul wanders in its self-made labyrinth, a universe composed of its own pain. But even in this perfect reflection of despair, the cosmic law provides a variable, an anomaly. Edgar Cayce described it as a faint glimmer, a small spark appearing in the distance. The Gita calls it the buddhi, the higher intellect, the quiet inner voice of truth that is never fully extinguished. Shankara would call it the first memory of the Atman, a flicker of the soul's true luminous nature, piercing through the dense clouds of Maya. This spark is not an external rescue. It is a memory of love, a single act of genuine kindness performed, a moment of pure compassion felt, a word of love received. It is the one piece of data in the soul's karmic ledger that does not belong to the logic of separation and pain. It is an echo of unity, and here the soul faces the most profound choice of its existence. It can remain in the familiar gravity of its own suffering, or it can move toward this tiny, inexplicable light. This is the true limit of our knowledge, the point where all spiritual physics hinges on a single, immeasurable variable, the soul's will. The law of karma has created the classroom, presented the data, and revealed the lesson, but it will not force the student to learn. When the soul is asked to take that one step, to turn its attention from the massive reality of its pain to the tiny possibility of that light, the transcripts of our greatest metaphysical explorers fall silent. Because what happens next is not determined by the past. It is not a reaction, but a creation. Will the soul choose to believe the evidence of its pain or the promise of that light? The entire journey home hangs on the answer to this one silent question. Why is this model of cosmic justice and soul physics not the cornerstone of our culture? Why is it relegated to the esoteric, while we continue to operate under a paradigm that offers only oblivion or damnation? The answer is the barrier of the materialist paradigm. Our dominant scientific model insists that consciousness is a byproduct of the brain, a complex but ultimately temporary illusion generated by biochemical processes. In this framework, the survival of consciousness after brain death is not just a mystery, it is an impossibility. Therefore, any evidence to the contrary, the meticulous records of Cayce, the philosophical rigor of Shankara, the vast anecdotal data from near-death experiences that echo these very journeys, is dismissed before it is even examined. It is labeled as hallucination, oxygen deprivation, or wishful thinking. But these reductionist explanations fail to account for the core of the evidence. They cannot explain how a consciousness without a functioning brain could perceive verifiable events. They cannot explain the profound internal consistency between the map provided by Casey, the laws articulated in the Gita, and the experiences reported by modern people who have clinically died and returned. The resistance is not truly scientific, it is philosophical. The materialist paradigm offers a cold comfort. If there is nothing after, then ultimate accountability does not exist. The physics of the soul, however, presents a universe that is profoundly, inescapably meaningful. A universe where every thought matters, where every action has an eternal consequence. This is not a comforting thought for a paradigm built on the randomness of existence. To accept this evidence is to accept a radical new level of personal responsibility. It is to acknowledge that we are not biological machines living in a meaningless void, but eternal souls, navigating a perfect system of learning. This paradigm shift is so immense, so demanding, that it is easier for the gatekeepers of our culture to ignore the data than to confront its staggering implications. The core of the issue lies in a fundamental category error. Mainstream science attempts to measure the non-physical with the tools of the physical. It is like trying to weigh a thought or measure the temperature of a memory. The subtle body, the karmic imprints, the fabric of consciousness itself. These do not operate within the known laws of thermodynamics or cellular biology. They operate under a different set of laws, the physics of the soul. When a skeptic dismisses the gray mist as a dying brain's final surge of DMT, they fail to explain the narrative coherence and the moral logic that underpins the experience. Hallucinations are typically chaotic, fragmented and nonsensical, yet the journey described by Casey and echoed in countless reports is anything but. It is a structured, purposeful and educational journey. It follows a clear arc from cause to consequence, from ignorance to understanding. This is not the signature of random neurochemistry. It is the signature of an intelligent, ordered process. Furthermore, the materialist explanation avoids the most difficult question. If consciousness is an illusion, who exactly is being deluded? The philosophy of Shankara directly confronts this paradox. He argues that the perceiver, the witness of our thoughts and experiences, cannot itself be a product of the mind. It must be something more fundamental. The materialist paradigm has no answer for the hard problem of consciousness, the simple, undeniable fact of subjective experience. This resistance is, ultimately, a form of intellectual comfort. To remain within the materialist cage is to avoid the terrifying and exhilarating responsibility that comes with acknowledging our own divinity and immortality. It is easier to believe we are insignificant accidents than to accept that we are the architects of our own eternal destiny. The evidence is not ignored because it is weak. It is ignored because it is too powerful. Now that you have seen this evidence, this map of cosmic law, you cannot unsee it. The suggestion that we live in a purposeful, learning-based universe governed by a precise physics of the soul changes the very ground beneath our feet. It suggests that the true spiritual path is not about adhering to a dogma, but about understanding a system. The path to liberation is paved with awareness, responsibility, and the conscious resolution of our inner discord. The ancient wisdom of the Gita, the rigorous logic of Shankara, and the modern revelations of Casey all point to the same truth. We are not here to be judged. We are here to learn. The journey out of the gray mist is not a rescue. It is a graduation. It is the moment the soul finally understands the law of reflection and chooses of its own will to align itself with the light of unity rather than the shadow of its own separation. This is not just a story about the afterlife. It is a blueprint for living. If this investigation into the physics of the soul resonates with the questions you've been asking, subscribe to continue the great exploration. This concludes our inquiry for now. A synthesis of documented evidence and timeless philosophical questions grounded in the sources that guide our journey. What echo did this story awaken in you?